Hello, my name is Sam Feltham. I'm the director of the Public Health Collaboration. Now, before I hand over to Liz, who will be taking you through the Real Food Lifestyle course, I just wanted to mention that in addition to providing this course for free, we also run an online weekly lifestyle support group you can join as well. Simply go to our website at www.phcuk.org/support and you can sign up right there. Also on the website, you can find lots of free resources and projects that you can get involved in, such as Real Food Runners or even the Ambassadors Programme as well. And if you find any of our content valuable whatsoever, please do consider donating what you can, or even regularly contributing to the charity by becoming an annual member. Now, without further ado, let me hand you over to Liz.
Hello again, and welcome to session 3 of our Real Food Low Carb Lifestyle course. Just a quick reminder again that the information contained within the course is just that. It's information and not medical advice. So if you have any medical questions at all, then you need to speak with your doctor or nurse. So today we're going to talk about glucose monitors and how to test, food packaging and labelling, and then how to shop wisely. Many people ask about glucose monitors, and if you're diabetic, then they're an excellent idea. Not so that you necessarily spend your entire lives testing, unless, of course, you're insulin dependent, in which case you will need to do so, but because it's the only way you will know how your body reacts to different things. Everyone is different and their bodies respond differently to different foods. For instance, for most people, eating porridge will make their glucose levels go up considerably. But there are some people for whom it doesn't have that effect. And unless you test, you won't know. So finger prick monitors, like the one in the photo on the right, are not expensive to buy. You can get a code free for about £20 in the UK, which includes 10 lancets, those are the needles you use to do the finger pricks, and 10 test strips. Pots of 50 strips are then about £8, but as you're not going to be spending your whole life testing, they're going to last quite a while. There are lots of other makes as well. Just have a look online and you'll find lots of them. But if you're self-funding, you need to check that the strips aren't expensive. Monitors, quite a few of them, are really inexpensive, but some of those have strips, which on the other hand are expensive. If you want to see what a particular food or meal does to your blood glucose level, then you need to test before you sit down to eat to get a baseline. And then you test again 1 hour and 2 hours after you've finished eating. If the level's still particularly high after 2 hours, you might want to test again at 3 hours to see if it's coming down. Ideally, you should aim to stay between 4 and 7.5 millimoles. That's between 72 and 135 if you're using milligrams per deciliter, which is what the measures are in the States. And if you eat low carb, this is what you should achieve. Of course, even if you aren't diabetic, you can do the same thing. You might be surprised to see how your body reacts. The other type of monitor is a constant glucose monitor, or CGM. These are made by Freestyle Libre and cost about £50, and they last for 2 weeks. You can see the girl in the photograph on your left has that round disc on her arm. That's the monitor, and she's putting her mobile phone to her arm because you can download an app to your phone and then take the readings from the monitor on your arm. You can get one for free in the UK if you're diabetic. Just go to the Freestyle Libre website, fill in the application form and send off for one. They generally take a couple of days to arrive in the post. There is also a link in the resources to a Twitter feed from Dr. Simon Tobin, who's a GP partner of Dr. David Unwin. He's slim, fit, extremely healthy. He's an ambassador, a national ambassador for the Park Run scheme, which many of you may have heard of. And he, a couple of years ago, tested a Freestyle Libre just to see the difference in his glucose levels between eating high and low carb meals. And the results are quite remarkable. Remember that whilst we are aiming for between 4 and 7.5, If you've been diabetic for a while, your levels may be higher than this, but over time they should come down. And when you eat, you want to stay on a fairly even keel, not have giant ups and downs like a roller coaster. These are the results of another colleague from the PHC who decided to do an experiment with breakfast. And on day one, those are the readings at the top. He started with his glucose level at 4.3, and then he had a bowl of full-fat yogurt with some blueberries and strawberries. And as you can see, his glucose levels taken at hourly intervals don't vary very much. They went up to 5, but then fairly quickly started already coming back to 4.8, back down to 4.5. But the following day, when he tried eating 2 Weetabix and some semi-skimmed milk, his glucose shot up to 7.9, and it's only after 3 hours that these levels come back to normal. And as we now know, high glucose levels in the bloodstream are toxic and damaging. So the longer the levels remain high, the greater the risk of damage to the blood vessels. Yet, as he's highlighted, the packet indicates that Weetabix is healthy. So testing can definitely show you which foods affect your glucose levels and by how much. You can, of course, do this even if you're not diabetic. You might be surprised at what you find. And whilst we're on the subject of monitors, have you ever wondered why your glucose levels are high in the morning? Sometimes higher than they were at bedtime the night before, even though you've been asleep all night and not eaten anything. This is called the dawn phenomenon. We all have an inner body clock, and your body knows you're going to need a burst of energy to get up in the morning. So in the early hours, whilst you're still asleep, your liver makes glucose from the breakdown of the fats and proteins you'd eaten the previous day through a process known as gluconeogenesis. And then it dumps that glucose into your bloodstream, hence the high reading first thing in the morning. However, once you get up and start moving around, maybe have breakfast, take the dog for a walk, or get off to work, the insulin will kick in and your glucose levels will come back down. Sorry about that. Now we're going to move on to shopping, and we're going to start with the traffic light labels familiar to everyone in the UK. In essence, a green label is good, orange means don't overdo it, and red you should avoid if possible, or eat as little as possible. We're not going to look at what the actual levels are, because the main idea of these is that you can tell at a glance if something is healthy or indeed not. So let's look at these packets of bread. See all the green flags? Must be healthy, no? But this is because they only show the sugar content, not the carbohydrate content. And as we know, the carbs digest down to glucose just the same as sugar does. So this is misleading. And in fact, if we turn the packet over, we find that it's just over 46 grams of carbohydrate for every 100 grams, and just one slice contains 22 grams of carbohydrate. This is the Warburton's Toasty, and the seeded batch is marginally better, but still nearly 39 grams per 100 grams. And it's the carbohydrate we need to look at, not just the sugar. If we think again about those green flags, they're signalling everything that's missing. It signals the lack of fat as if that were a good thing, but actually we need fat. And as you will remember from earlier sessions, we don't actually need carbohydrate at all. And yet that's pretty much the only thing that's in these products. Some of the worst offenders are cereals. Look how the manufacturers try and persuade us that these are healthy. Cereals have all sorts of supposedly healthy attributes flagged up. Whole grain, high fibre, no artificial colours. On the subject of cereals, I wonder if you know the origin of cornflakes. Well, Dr. Kellogg, and he was a Dr. Kellogg, was medical director at a sanatorium, or what we would now call clinic or a hospital. And he believed that meat increased sexual desires. And as a Seventh-day Adventist, he considered this a sin, to such an extent that he and his wife slept in separate rooms and adopted all their children. Quite how he thought those children had come to exist, I'm not quite sure. But even worse than sex, in his view, was masturbation. So in an effort to prevent it, he developed cornflakes, which he then fed to his patients. And the Seventh-day Adventists continue to fund, to the tune of several $billion a year, the vegan movement. They own several manufacturing plants producing vegan products, from which they derive millions of dollars in profits, and much of which they don't pay tax on, as they're classed as a charity. And you'll find that much of the anti-meat propaganda you read in the newspapers can be traced back to the Seventh-day Adventists. Belinda Fettke, wife of the well-known Australian orthopaedic surgeon Gary Fettke, has done a great deal of research on the subject, and we've given you some links in the resources if you'd like to find more about it. But back to the crunchy nuts. Again, if we look at the back, it shows that in every 100 grams of crunchy nut, there are 83 grams of carbohydrate. And remember too, that when they give a portion size, they use a small portion of 30 grams. And yet the picture on the front of the box shows a bowl overflowing with cereal. Certainly not 30 grams, more like 90 probably. So again, these are products with few nutrients, just empty carbohydrates, which are so damaging to our bodies, and yet flagged up as healthy. On the other hand, many healthy foods that look bad if you look at the front of the packet, in fact, are very good. For instance, everyone agrees we should all eat oily fish. It's extremely good for you, packed full of anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. And yet look at the packet. This is smoked mackerel, wild caught, so sustainable and good for the environment, relatively inexpensive, and as we've said, extremely good for you. Mackerel gives you 26% of your recommended intake of fat and 15% of your recommended amount of salt. It's also an excellent source of protein. The UK government and other governments recommend at least 2 portions a week of oily fish, yet they also tell you to avoid anything with lots of red markers. So as you can see, the messaging becomes muddled. The same applies for a beef steak, which is an excellent source of protein, fat, and various vitamins and minerals. It's a far better source of iron than spinach, for example. Most vitamins are fat-soluble, as we discussed last time, and not water-soluble. So although they're present in vegetables, unless you eat fat at the same time, they're not bioavailable, i.e. our bodies can't absorb them. This steak will provide you with 49% of your requirement for saturated fats. Now maybe think what else you can have to fill up the other 51% you need. Remember that this is stable saturated fats, and these are the healthy ones, not the polyunsaturated ones. This too, macadamia nuts have healthy fats and are low in sugars, which it does show with the green marking on the sugars. But with those red marks, we might be put off, and yet macadamias are one of the nuts with the lowest levels of carbohydrate in them. Cheddar too, like all hard cheeses, is an excellent source of protein and dietary fat, and of course calcium, essential for bones and teeth. And it has virtually no carbohydrates, so it's not going to raise your glucose levels. As an aside, hard cheese recently, it's been discovered that if you eat it at the end of a meal, it's been shown to protect your teeth and gums. No one currently knows quite why, but more than one trial has demonstrated this effect. Yet, again, looking at the packet, all those red markers would indicate you shouldn't eat it, and yet we've just discovered it's extremely healthy. The corollary of this is that a bottle of Diet Coke tells us it's healthy. I think we could just do to mention artificial sweeteners here. Whilst there are sweeteners that are suitable for a low-carb lifestyle, erythritol, xylitol, and stevia, for example, those are generally not used by the food industry, partly because they tend to be more expensive. And the ones that are used, whilst they won't increase your blood glucose levels, trick your body into thinking you've eaten sugar, which makes your body produce insulin. And overproduction of insulin can lead to insulin resistance, which is not a good thing, even if you're not diabetic. And as insulin is a fat storage hormone, all the time you have insulin going around your body, you won't be able to burn off your own body fat. So it will hamper your weight loss. The other thing is, if all you're having is one bottle of Diet Coke now and then, or a can of Diet Coke now and then, that's not really going to be a problem. But if you're having a 2-litre bottle of Coke every day, the amount of insulin that is going to provoke your body into producing is going to interfere with your weight loss, because with that high level of insulin, your body can't burn fat at the same time as it's trying to store fat. And obviously, you haven't consumed anything for it to store, but the very fact that the insulin is circulating will prevent you from burning off your own body fat. So it can significantly interfere with weight loss. But the other point is that we really need to retrain our taste buds so we don't crave the sugary things anymore. It takes surprisingly little time, actually, as little as 3 weeks. In no time at all, you'll find that things you used to enjoy now taste revoltingly sickly sweet and not at all enjoyable. But if you continually consume artificial sweeteners in diet drinks, be they fizzy drinks like Diet Coke or low sugar squashes, or in sugar-free jellies or cakes with quite high levels of artificial sweetener in, then your taste buds are continually stimulated and your sweetness receptors are continually stimulated, making it more likely that you'll be tempted to eat sugary things. Health claims on the front of packaging: no added sugar or sugar-free. This usually means the food hasn't had sugar added to it as an ingredient. But a food that has no added sugar might still taste sweet and can still contain sugar. Just because a food contains no added sugar doesn't necessarily mean it has a low sugar content. The food may contain ingredients that have a naturally high sugar content, like dates or honey, fruit, and milk. So beware these health claims. On the front of packet slogans, you find lots of things: no calories or sugar, only natural flavors, no added preservatives, this product is GMO-free, this product is gluten-free, this product is allergen-free, or this product is suitable for vegetarians and vegans. All these are designed to do is one thing: make you buy it. But they aren't suitable for human consumption. They're highly processed and contain no nutrients. Yet what your body requires is nutrients for cell growth and renewal, and to build a strong immune system and a healthy body and brain. If we look at the back or side packets of package labelling, there's usually a nutrition panel, and the carbohydrate content per 100, we suggest you would look for foods with less than 10 grams of carbohydrate per 100, and preferably less than 5 grams. And be careful too with portion amounts. For instance, this is the back of a packet of bread, and a portion here is 1 slice. But are you going to eat 1 slice or 2? If you were going to make a sandwich, you'd have 2 slices, which would then be 40 grams of carbohydrate, not even just 20. So in general, when you're going shopping, look for something that's less than 10 grams of carbohydrate per slice, going on this carbohydrate line. And we'll look at this again in a minute. Cereals, as we've seen in particular, are misleading when it comes to portion size. According to a team at Cardiff University, the pictures on most boxes display a serving that's on average 3 times bigger than the manufacturer's own recommended portion. You can see that in the photograph. The bowl is overflowing, and yet on the right is what a portion of 30 grams actually looks like. 9 of the products that they studied depicted a bowl brimming with cereal and milk that would require 3 times the 30-gram recommended serving and 375 mils of milk, which altogether will contain 31.5 grams of added sugars. But then you're not going to be eating cereals anymore, are you? I hope you've already stopped. So let's look at something that we do want to eat. I think this might be clearer. The writing's larger. These are pecan nuts. And as you can see, they're only 4.3 grams of carbohydrate per 100. Perfect. Though beware, if you're trying to lose weight, munching your way through a whole bag of them isn't going to help. It won't put your glucose up, that's true. But if we look here, 100 grams is 720 calories. And as we've said, we're not counting calories. There's no need to count calories. And it isn't a simple question of calories in, calories out, which is what we've often been told. However, we do have to bear calories in mind to a certain degree. And if you eat a whole bag of these nuts, 720 calories, that's the equivalent of a whole meal. So if you're just having it as a snack, don't be surprised if you don't lose weight. On the other hand, these are dates, and as you can see, they contain 67 grams of carbohydrate, extremely high. We use them solely when baking. For instance, we put two dates in a batch of carrot cake, which will then make about 20 or 22 portions. So the amount of date, and therefore carbohydrate, per portion is going to be minimal. Ingredients on a packet are usually listed in order by weight. So the first few ingredients are the main ones in the product, while the ones towards the end of the list are usually in smaller amounts. So if you look at the packet and the first few ingredients are high carb items like flour, sugar, and of course the vegetable oils. I know they don't contain carbohydrates, but vegetable oils, as we've seen, are dangerous. Then you want to avoid them. The fewer the number of ingredients, the less processed the food. To look at this, let's compare natural butter against heart-healthy margarine. On the left, we've got Kerrygold butter, and on the right, we've got Benecol margarine, strongly recommended to reduce your cholesterol. I'm going to read you the list of ingredients for Benecol because the writing's extremely small. The main ingredient is rapeseed oil, which, as we've discovered, is high in inflammatory omega-6 fat. Then it's got water, plant sterols, buttermilk powder, salt, emulsifiers, and it names several of them. Flavorings are acidity regulator, colouring, vitamin A and vitamin D. Remember too that when they add vitamins artificially to products, they're not as bioavailable, i.e. they're not as easily absorbed by our bodies as vitamin A and vitamin D in real foods. Compare that, on the other hand, with the butter. The ingredients for that are simply cream and salt. And if you were to buy unsalted butter, it wouldn't even have salt in it. It would simply be cream. By the way, you can make butter yourself using a food processor. You just add the cream and keep the processor running basically until it turns from cream into heavily whipped cream, and then gradually it'll turn to butter. There are lots of videos on YouTube which show you how to do it. It's a little bit more complicated than doing that, because if you want the butter to keep, you have to rinse it after it's formed in the processor. You have to take it out. You remove the rest of the liquid that forms, and you need to rinse it in cold water. So check out instructions for how to do it on YouTube, but certainly an option. So when we come to sugar, the basic simple sugars, those are called monosaccharides and disaccharides. Monosaccharides mean they have one molecule, and disaccharides means they have two molecules. All the things ending in O's are sugar. Dextrose, fructose, galactose, glucose, lactose, maltose, sucrose. These are names of basic sugars. Fructose, for example, is the natural sugar found in fruit, and lactose, for example, is the natural sugar in milk. Sucrose, too, is often found in fruit, and many fruits are a mix of sucrose and fructose. Fructose is quite interesting. It's not processed in the same way as glucose in our bodies, doesn't go direct into the bloodstream, but instead is processed by the liver and turned directly into fat. And if you have fatty liver disease or your triglycerides are high, then you should certainly limit the fruit you eat, because fruit and fructose are one of the main drivers of fatty liver disease. So keep your fruit portion small and try to stick to the low carb fruits such as berries. But here are the secret sugars. 56 names for sugar. Fair enough, some of them do use the word sugar, so not so secret. There's date sugar, raw sugar, etc. But what about some of these others? Dextrin, diastatic malt. Would you know that was sugar? Well, they are, and the manufacturers use this to confuse us. This is the ingredients list of a product. I'm not entirely sure actually what it is, but if you can see all the things highlighted in black are 6 different forms of sugar. So we've got high fructose corn syrup, that's sugar, Sugar mentioned as sugar. Maltodextrin, which we've just seen, is also sugar. Strawberry puree, in a sense, is the concentrated sugar content from strawberries. Corn syrup solids, that's also sugar, and sucralose is another. And one of the reasons they split them up is because if you lumped them all together, it would mean it was more or less the first ingredient, because as we've explained before, the quantities, they're generally in the order of quantities of the amount that's contained in the product. So if they had to put all the sugars in one, sugar would probably be the main ingredient. But by breaking it up into the different types of sugar, they hide them here and there. You don't recognize all the names as being sugar anyway, so it tricks you into thinking that it's better than it is. So in summary, don't be fooled by front of packet marketing and health claims. Read the nutrition labels for total carbohydrates and check the serving size. Carefully check ingredients and avoid foods containing flour, starch, sugar in its many different guises, and vegetable and seed oils. Just remember that the greater the number of ingredients, the more processed the product is. And ultimately, try and focus on buying real food, the type of food that comes in minimal packaging. Of course, you have to wrap up a piece of meat to take it home, but essentially it can sit there on your counter. It doesn't have to be contained in a bowl or a packet. Cheese, again, all those vegetables, you can buy loose vegetables, eggs are loose. These are ingredients, not products. This chart, by the way, is taken from the excellent visual guides on a website called dietdoctor.com, Diet Doctor written as one word. There's a whole range of these, including ones on fruit, vegetables, pulses, alcoholic drinks even. So check them out. They're really useful. And they always have the fewer carbohydrates on the left and those with slightly more on the right. So just to recap, we've looked at the benefits of a glucose monitor and how to test. We've looked at how to read food packaging and learn to interpret misleading marketing and how to shop wisely. And next week, we're going to look further into this and discuss alcohol and then also exercise, sleep and mindfulness, because diet isn't the only change we need to make ideally. There are other things that do affect our health. And remember again, if you want to ask questions or share ideas with others following the low-carb lifestyle, you can register for our support group, which includes live Zoom sessions every week and a very active Facebook group. For details on how to register, just go to the PHC website, phcuk.org, and look under courses. So thank you for listening this time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.